Hi there. Before we actually exit this module, I thought it might be very valuable to actually walk you through a demonstration within a software as to how we could manage a Kanban board, what a Kanban board might look like, and how we might set up and manage our different sprints with it using that Scrum methodology. So there's many different tools that are out there that we could use, or I could have used for this. I happen to choose and the tools that I'll give you is the probably the most popular software application out there is Jira. There's also CA Agile or Rally. Um, there's a Azure DevOps. There's a Asana is another one, and the list just goes on and on as far as the software applications that are out there that could help you. They're all very similar, some more sophisticated than others. I have chose to use a relatively more simple application, one that I have easy access to, called Project for the Web. So what I'd like to do is show you a couple of demonstrations of how to use Project for the Web to what a Kanban board might looks like, and again, how to set up and maintain your sprints, those user stories inside of Project for the Web. So I've created two different projects. You'll see me walk through those here in just a second. The first project is a small little project for a workshop. That's the one in which I'll show you how to maintain a Kanban board. And then the second larger project where we use Scrum is a shopping cart project where we're actually building an application. So with that, let's get started with our demonstration. So let us go into our simplest project, which was the planning workshop. And if you'll remember, within the planning workshop, we had this project, we had a handful of tasks that we needed to work on. The date for the workshop was known. There were just a few people that were working on this project. And so again, as we come back into this project, we learned how to leverage the grid view to help us with this project. And what I'm going to do from this grid view, I'm kind of going to reset a couple things just so we can start fresh here. I'll reset the percent complete on these items that we updated from our last session. Because what I'd like to do now is I would like to focus on the board view within Project for the Web. And again, we've got our simplest project here. We've got our planning workshop. So without further ado, let's click on the board view across the top here. And you'll notice the view that we come into is over here on the right. We're in the board page, but we have the ability to group our tasks within the board view in different ways. Right now we came into the bucket view, and what I would like to navigate to is our progress view. And so now I have our grouping of tasks, or we have our grouping of tasks on the board view in three different buckets. A bucket that says not started, one that says in progress, and one that says completed. So with just a couple of clicks, going to the board view and then clicking on group by progress, we have our own little Kanban board for this simple little project. And within this project, because it is so simple, how we could maintain these tasks is simply as one of our teammates or someone begins working on the task, we could simply grab the task out of the not started bucket and slide it over into the in progress bucket. You'll notice that when we do that, all of a sudden the task, because it is in progress, automatically moves to 50% complete. We'll take another task and drag it from the not started to the in progress. That task too moves to 50% complete. And then finally, once we work on a task and it's completed, all you have to do is simply drag it to the completed bucket, and that task is now marked as 100% complete with a strike through in the task in this view. And so this is how you can quickly work with the board view within Project for the Web, um, and more of an agile approach for working with your tasks. I'll hop back now to the grid view, and you can see that the updates that we applied to the tasks are actually appear here within the grid view as well. So this is how to work with the board view in a very simple schedule. Simple task list, if you will, and how this board view can really be efficient in this type of project. So that was a very simple demonstration of what the Kanban board looks like, that board view inside of Project for the Web, very similar to many of the other applications that are out there. What I'd like to do now is show you how to use Project for the Web in a more advanced way, in setting up those different sprints, the user stories, and your product backlog. Let us move over into our demonstration. So what I'd like to do now is show you some more advanced capability that we have within Project for the Web when it comes to helping us with respect to an Agile project or following the Scrum methodology. And if you recall, we took a pretty kind of a simplistic approach in a previous module when we worked on the shopping cart project. So I'm sitting here on Project Home, the Project Home, and you can see our shopping cart project sitting there. So let's drill into our shopping cart project. And it does remember exactly where we left off. And if you remember, we set up these buckets to somewhat mirror the process within the Scrum methodology. And what I'd like to do now is simply kind of reset our scenario. I'm gonna move all of these tasks back to the product backlog. And as I'm doing that, you'll recall that within the Scrum methodology, we use user stories as opposed to tasks. And these tasks that we have here within Project for the Web, these are basically the short descriptions that we establish for each one of the user stories. And if I click on that short description or that task, you can see the user story fully written out here in the sentence structure that they should be created within. So I'll now close that dialog box. What I want to do now is I want to move over to the grid view. And within the grid view, we're actually going to employ a few of the different capabilities within Project for the Web that we've worked on in other modules, and we're now going to bring those into how to help us with respect to our managing our project following the Scrum methodology. So one of the first things that I want to do is I want to insert some summary tasks into this schedule, into this listing of tasks or user stories here. So, and I want those summary tasks to appear up above or at the top. So one quick way to insert a summary, insert a task above, if you right click on the task, and then you can say insert task above. And this first one that I'm going to create is called, I'm going to call it product backlog. And I hit enter, and now you'll notice that product backlogs exist. However, the tasks are at the same outline level. And I'd like to have those all indented underneath product backlog. To do that, if I simply select all of the tasks, and if I right click and I say make subtask, you'll notice that those tasks are now indented underneath there. Now I want to create a couple more tasks at the top. So if I right click and say insert task above, perhaps on this task I'm going to call this one, we're going to call this summary task sprint 2 and hit enter. And then I want to insert a task above that, and we'll call this one sprint 1. So now I have these this product backlog summary task, and I have a sprint 1 and sprint 2 sitting here waiting for us to leverage. And what I want to do now is I want to bring in the effort column for us to work with. So if I click on add column and I insert that column called effort, it quickly appears here. And at the same time, I'd like to hide the assigned to as well as the duration column, because for what we're doing and how we're working with Project for the Web in this type of project and in this scenario, we don't need those columns. So What we're looking at now is our product backlog, all of our user stories, and that are sitting there that need to be created. And so what we want to do now is we would want to conduct what's called backlog grooming. And for that step, what we do is we look at each one of our user stories and working with the team. And right now, I'll call your attention to the fact that we have 4 group members or 4 team members on this project. We have 2 developers, 1 product owner, and 1 Scrum Master. And working with the team, we want to assess the size of each one of these user stories. Now, following the Scrum methodology, we would use what's called story points, or we would use what's called story points. That field is not available to us within Project for the Web. However, we do have this field or column called effort. So rather than leveraging the story points column and doing relative sizing, we're simply going to perform effort estimating for each one of these tasks. And so let's take a look at this first task, this access shopping cart. And that task, the team says, hey, that's going to take 24 hours worth of effort to complete that task. The next task, save an item, that one's actually going to take 32 hours to complete. Get a quote, we're going to say that's kind of hard. That's going to take 40 hours. And again, we just go working with the team. We're performing sizing or effort estimating for each one of these tasks. So we're just inputting this information here. And so now we've completed that backlog grooming. We've performed effort estimating for each one of these tasks. And now what we want to do is basically prioritize these user stories or these tasks. So the product owner, looking to the product owner is kind of the the person that's primarily responsible for that. The product owner says, well, being able to access the shopping cart, that's kind of key, and that actually needs to happen within our first sprint. So what we could do is we could hover over the left side of this task, and you'll notice how your cursor changes. And if you hold down on your left mouse button and drag that task up and release your left mouse button, that task will now reposition underneath sprint 1. And at this point in time, you'll see it's at the same outline level as sprint 1, and we want that task to actually be a subtask underneath sprint 1. So if we right click and click on make subtask, all of a sudden it's now indented underneath there. Coming back to the product owner says, oh, being able to save an item, that's pretty key. That we should also work to get that done within sprint 1. So we drag that item up. And then the product owner says, well, also getting a quote, that's key. That's key. I guess it doesn't necessarily, we could do any one of these, but I think getting quote, we should work on that one in sprint 1 as well. So we could now slide that item up and add it to sprint 1 as well. So let's pause right here for just a second, because we're doing our sprint planning activity right now, and working with the product owner, we've identified these 3 tasks that we want to occur within sprint 1. But what we have to do, we have to pause here for just a moment, and we have to think about the size of our team and the capacity that this team can deliver. Remember, there are currently 4 members of the team, 1 product owner, 1 Scrum Master, and only 2 developers. So the other factor that we need to bring into this scenario, as we mentioned before, we're running sprints that are in 2-week durations. So based upon the fact that we have only 2 developers, but those 2 developers are going to run 2-week sprints, or we're going to run 2-week sprints, that means the developers, we have the capacity to do 80 hours worth of work or complete 80 hours worth of effort. And as we're looking at this sprint number 1, we can see right now we've hit 96. So we are basically creating a scenario that is not achievable for our team to complete all this work within sprint 1. So based upon that, let's working with the product owner says, well, as I mentioned, that get quote, it's kind of important, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen in sprint 1. So let's move that down into, we'll kind of maybe say we'll get that in sprint number 2. So we could grab a hold of that task and drop it down and kind of lay it into underneath sprint number 2. Again, it drops underneath sprint 2, but it's at the same outline level, and what we need to do is we need to make that a subtask. So we have now created a scenario which sprint number 1 is achievable based upon the capacity of the team. The capacity of the team is they can deliver 80 hours. That's the development team. They can deliver 80 hours worth of effort. Right now we only have 56. We could still perhaps take on some more work. And maybe the product owner says, oh, you know what, that's being able to see the number of items, that would be good to get into sprint 1 as well. So we could actually take this see number of items, drag it up underneath sprint 1. So now all of a sudden we are in a situation where we've lined out our work, and at this point in time our effort, the amount of effort that we're planning to perform within sprint 1 just happens to be exactly equal to the capacity for what the team can deliver. So with that, the team performs that step of establishing commitment. Do we believe that's realistic and achievable? And perhaps the team says yes. So now that we've achieved that consensus, we could actually bring in another column within the grid view to help us out here. Let's click on Add Column, and let's choose the Bucket column. So as soon as we choose the Bucket column, you'll notice that this when it populates here, all of the items are coded out with the product backlog. And what we can do from here is we could actually, because this is in sprint 1, these first 3 items, because they're now in sprint 1, we could actually move those over into our sprint backlog. So I'll change this for these first 3 items here. I'll move that over into our sprint backlog. And for the one that's still in sprint number 2, we'll kind of leave it in the product backlog for right now. And let me go ahead and add another column here. Let's add our assigned to column. And at this point in time, you'll notice that it too is blank. And let's add one additional column to our view. Let's bring in our finish date, or our finish column. You'll notice that right now the finish dates for all these tasks say 5/25, because that's where the initial end date of the project was at. But we know this sprint is actually going to complete. It's a 2-week duration sprint, and we know this sprint is actually going to complete on Friday the 19th. So we could actually input the Friday 6/19 into this finish cell for these 3 tasks. And so now that we've made these modifications, adjusted our grid view here, brought in more information, let's move over to our board view, the one we worked a lot with in the previous module. And you'll notice as soon as we come to the board view, the tasks that we moved into sprint 1 in the previous view, they're now in our sprint backlog here. And so we have these items sitting in our sprint backlog, and the sprint starts, right? And so what happens now? The developer reaches into the sprint backlog, and they pull out one of these items to work on, and they move it into the design stage. And at this point in time, that person could actually assign themselves to this task or to this user story, simply clicking on the drop down there and click on Assign. And the same is true with respect to maybe save an item. The second developer on the team reaches into the sprint backlog, pulls that item out, and they have the ability to then assign themselves to that task. And moving into our daily process, moving into our process of the daily stand-up. Each day we come together with the team, express what we worked on yesterday, what we plan to work on today, And if we have any blockers, and at the same time, we are working to move these tasks or these user stories from the left to the right within the Kanban board as quickly as we can. And just like we mentioned before, to move a task from one stage to the next, you can simply grab that task and slide it across. And if we move back to the grid view after we've made these updates, you'll notice from the grid view, we have the ability to now to see what tasks are within sprint number one, what stage of the life cycle they're within, who's assigned to that task, and we can still see when they're targeted to complete. So this completes the video on how to leverage Project for the Web to perform more advanced capability with respect to managing an Agile project or following that Scrum methodology. And with that, that concludes the demonstrations within Project for the Web. I hope this added some value for this course by you being able to see how all of those things can come to life within an application as opposed to just text on a slide. So now on to our next module.